It's working. Okay, dear colleagues and guests, good afternoon or good evening, and warm welcome to today's event hosted by the Crimean Studies Center at the Kyiv Mogil Academy. And we are here today to hear about and discuss a topic that is um, extremely relevant and strategically vital. And the topic is who are the Crimean Tatar diaspora and what do they mean for Ukraine? Because since Ukraine gained independence in 1991, the Crimean Tatars diaspora has profoundly supported our sovereignty, and they advocated a lot for political rights for the whole nation and welfare in Crimea. And furthermore, influenced by their history and, of course, what we say, historical experience under the Russian rule, these groups have actively encouraged Turkey to maintain a close strategic partnership with Ukraine. In today's public lecture, we will have the opportunity to explore these relationships through a long-term historical and comparative lens. And it's a pleasure for me and an honor to introduce the person who will guide us through this complex and fascinating topic. Our speaker today is Dr. Filiz Tutku Aydın, and Dr. Aydın is an assistant professor of political science at the Social Sciences University of Ankara, and she holds a PhD from the University of Toronto and specializes in migration history, political mobilization, and the political history of former Soviet states. But what is especially important for us today, Dr. Aydın is not only a distinguished scholar, but also an active advocate, and she is the one who organized international academic petitions protesting the 2014 Russian occupation of Crimea, as well as 2022 full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And as I said, it's my honor to hand the floor to Dr. Aydın, and the floor is yours. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much. I am honored to be here. This is the first time I'm giving a public lecture in Ukraine. I previously attended conferences, but it was a great honor to be invited to your class. So I'm very happy to see everybody here. I'm also, I want to start by saying I am so sorry about yesterday's attacks in Ukraine, and our heart is always with the Ukrainian army and Slava Ukraina. Today, my topic is Crimean Tatar diaspora and Ukraine. So I will start by sharing my slides. Okay. So, and also start my chronometer. I will hope to give a lecture of 42 minutes to 1 hour. I'll see. And I want to get a lot of questions. I really like to get questions from students. So let's start. This is a picture recently taken, with Neriman Celal, Ukrainian ambassador to Turkey, a former vice president of Crimean Tatar Mejlis, and also former political prisoner, right, in Russia, who was, liberated by the help of Turkish President Erdogan, in conjunction with, of course, President Zelensky. They made talks with Russia. And later he was appointed to Turkey as the ambassador. It's a very significant event. For the first time, of course, there's a Crimean Tatar ambassador from Ukraine, of course, in Turkey. And you see the Crimean Tatar diaspora from Eskişehir there with, it's shot on 18th of May, the deportation day, with Crimean Tatar, Turkish, and Ukrainian flags. So our research question for my paper is, why should Ukraine care about Crimean Tatar diaspora? And can Crimean Tatar diaspora be accepted as a diaspora of Ukraine? If so, what should Ukraine do with this diaspora? What type of engagement there should be? What are the policy options for Ukraine? So when we look at a short recent history of relations between Crimean Tatar diaspora and Ukraine, we see in the post-1990s period, Ukraine did not object the return of the deported Crimean Tatars from Central Asia. So the diaspora also was very supportive of Ukraine's independence. Despite that, despite this general framework of mutual support, there was a friction between the Ukrainian government and at that time, Kravchuk, Kuchma, right? Later, Yushchenko, Yanukovych, due to a lot of unresolved issues such as return of land, compensations for repatriations, quota in Verkhovna Rada and Crimean parliament demands of Crimean Tatars, or some kind of representation demands, discrimination, ongoing discrimination, racism in Crimea, and human rights violations, and continuation of Russian settler colonialism. But as you know, Ukraine pre-2014 was a very different Ukraine than the Ukraine after 2014. So we see a strong support of Ukraine during and after occupation of Crimea, and also Russia's full scale of war. So we have this picture of Crimean Tatar diaspora protesting in front of Ukrainian assemblies, living before 2014 for the rights of Crimean Tatars. And after 2014, the conditions, the situation completely changed, and they have been an advocate of Ukraine, both in Turkey and international realm, and in their internal politics as well. So what kind of theories we have for states and their relations with their diasporas? Diaspora literature started around 2000 and first focused on how diasporas organized as social movements, what are the diaspora institutions, and what kind of narratives they used, and how they mobilized the diasporic people, whether culture was more important or politics more important, right? But later, about 2010, the literature was overtaken by more studies about how states utilize their diasporas for political purposes, right? And currently, we see daily, right, evidence of that between the Jewish diaspora, relations between Jewish diaspora and in US and Israel, right? So diasporas became an important international relations agent, and the states started to pay attention more to their diasporas. And we see three types of basically policies. So first, states try to tap their diasporas because diasporas are a great source of human resources, right? Material resources. There's a lot of philanthropy from diaspora that is collected and sent to the home state. Diaspora also has a lot of cultural resources. We have seen a lot of examples of this, especially from the Ukrainian diaspora. You would see there are a lot of organizations, Canadian Institute of Ukrainian Studies, who collected, for example, oral history of Holodomor, right? And these kind of resources always support the well-being of the home state. Secondly, we see embrace approach. So sometimes states embrace their diasporas to help define their own political identity and achieve domestic political goals, right? So they want to extend their national identity transnationally beyond their borders, right? An example would be Turkish president telling the Turks in Germany that don't forget Turkish, right? Don't forget Turkish language. Because obviously Turkish, according to Turkish president, Turks in Germany still constitute a part of Turkish nation. And the third policy is governance. Sometimes, the more exemplary way, states adhere to global norms and develop civic diaspora policies. So they establish relations based on democracy and human rights rather than ethnic origin. So in the first part of my lecture, more than half, I would like to give you a profile of Crimean Tatar diaspora, and in the 1/3, I would like to talk about Ukraine and Crimean Tatar diaspora relations. So Crimean Tatar diaspora emerged after the Russian annexation of Crimea, and they became refugees to the Ottoman Empire starting from 1783. So my own ancestors also came around the, I think, 1800s, turn of the century, because I'm counting back 9 generations, so it's about that time. I know their names. Their names were Hassan and Hediye. They left Crimea, went to Dobruja, Romania, remained there like 50, 60 years. And in 1878, Ottoman-Russian War, they remigrated to Anatolia. So that's one part of my family. So just like my family, hundreds of thousands of Crimean Tatars immigrated to the Ottoman Empire. And today we have diasporas in US, Romania, Bulgaria. Obviously, they were part of Ottoman Empire before. Of course, Turkey, but also with the recent, and Brazil, right, due to the Second World War. But we also have now new diasporas in Ireland, Lithuania, and of course, we still have the exile community in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. So it became a global diaspora across time. Another aspect of Crimean Tatar diaspora has a very strong politics of memory, memory of genocide, the deportation. They have a strong attachment to the homeland. Homeland is central to Crimean Tatar identity. Historical statehood, the Crimean Tatar Khanate is an important part of Crimean Tatar national narrative. And their common culture based on language and religion are also important aspects of their identity. In many places, we see strong integration with the Turkic culture, not necessarily Turkish, but some version of Turkic languages and Turkic culture there, because there are strong overlaps between all Turkic cultures, and Crimean Tatars are also Turkic people. But other than that, they have overlapping and hybrid social spatial identities. What do I mean? I mean they belong into now different religious sects or organizations, right? Some are more kind of more observing Muslims, some are more secular. But they also hybridized with the identities of the host societies they are living in. So in America, they acquired American culture. In Turkey, of course, they acquired Turkish culture. Turkey is a very tricky place for Crimean Tatar diaspora because ethnic distinctions are very small. So it's very hard to maintain ethnic distinctiveness. So as a result of Russian settler colonial policies, your professor, Martin Kisley, has written a very good piece on that. As you see, the population of Crimean Tatars in Crimea decreases, while the Russian population in Crimea increases. And this decreasing population are in diaspora. I want to suggest you this online map with Crimean Tatar toponyms, which also shows the kind of history of Crimean Tatar diaspora. And here I want to start by underlining one commonality. It is the Cossack identity. So if you look at this online map, you can see the territories of Cossacks and Crimean Tatars in southern Ukraine, right? like Kherson, Zaporozhye, Melitopol, Mariupol, right? In these regions, there is an overlap. So we know that a lot of Crimean Tatar words are acquired by the Cossacks or traditions acquired. And my good friend, Professor Alexander Halenko, is working on the kind of Turkic elements in Ukrainian identity, right? So there's already a kind of a give and take between the Ukrainian ethno-national identity and Crimean Tatar ethno-national identity. So today, there are major places. The major places Crimean Tatars have an old diaspora, right? Diaspora after Russian annexation and or World War II are these places. Turkey has an overwhelming number. It's in millions. But since it is not allowed to ask for ethnic identity or mother tongue in Turkish census, we cannot know it for sure. In Romania, it's 40,000, but it's probably a lot more because a lot of Crimean Tatars prefer to register as Turkish for various reasons. Same with Bulgaria, they prefer to register as Turkish, and there is a high intermarriage, of course, between the smaller Crimean Tatar community in Bulgaria and a larger Turkish community. There are still maybe 200,000 to 300,000 Crimean Tatars in Uzbekistan. We also don't know it for sure because of lack of a census. And some of the Crimean Tatars, as you know, has returned to Crimea. And in the US, we have a few thousand, again, Crimean Tatars emanating from World War II refugees, right? They used to live in camps in Austria, and they were relocated to a third safe country, which is the US. So this map is missing a US component, but the places which have Crimean Tatars most is Ukraine, of course, Turkey and Uzbekistan, but also we see Crimean Tatars in Romania, Bulgaria, Kazakhstan, and also Russia itself, of course, because Crimean Tatars were originally, some of them were exiled to Siberia. So these are some of the numbers I mentioned, but most of them, as I said, are estimated. This is according to the censuses, but there are a lot of differences between the real numbers and censuses. So Crimean Tatars in Romania. So the Crimean Tatars, after immigrating to the Ottoman Empire, were located into Dobruja region of today's Romania, which is the coastal region, but it has also a steppe character, so that Crimean Tatars could continue their agricultural activities. And the steppe climate is a climate they're used to. Plus, Romania has a coast to Black Sea. So generally, the Crimean Tatars who were living on the Black Sea coast settled in, places like Dobrich, Varna, and, Constanta, the coast, or Mangalia in Romania. This place in Romania, Dobruja, the steppe region, turned into kind of a diasporic space, what we call in the literature, right, for the Crimean Tatars, because it was like a faunus that they can reproduce their culture and they could maintain their traditions and language, because it was so densely populated with Crimean Tatars. It was 95% Crimean Tatar, and there weren't even any Turks around. So this region kind of saved the Crimean Tatar culture. This enabled Crimean Tatar culture to continue for another 100 years in diaspora, right? Only now, today, Crimean Tatars are becoming more assimilated. But in this region, and after coming to Turkey, with this culture, they intermarried and formed other ethnoscapes in Turkey, such as Eskişehir, again, densely populated region of Crimean Tatars. And this kind of living together culture had helped Crimean Tatars to maintain their traditional identity they brought from Crimea. And also, we know large numbers of Girey dynasty, as you know, Hoca Hakan Kırımlı has written a book on this, were also given property in Balkan territories. So they had connections with the Crimean Tatars, like they sometimes ruled over them in these territories. And Ottoman Sultan even formed a special city called Mecidiye just for Crimean Tatar immigrants. And we know today, like more than 100 of villages in Constanta and Tulcha districts, there are Crimean Tatars. And also in the northern part of this steppe region, there were also previous Nogay, what can we say, autonomous state, right? And they also stayed there. However, with the 1877-1878 Ottoman-Russian War and continuing Balkan wars, created an immigration wave from Romania. So large number of Crimean Tatars in this compact Dobruja region has emigrated to Turkey. It's not because Romanians were so bad and they kind of pushed the Tatars away. In fact, they wanted Tatars to stay, but it's the kind of collective memory of Russian army and encounters with Russia. They didn't want to live under Russian domination. They thought Russia is going to take Dobruja as well. So they once again immigrated to Anatolia. And little number of remaining Crimean Tatars in Romania has continued their culture through institutions such as Mecidiye Muslim Seminary. Here you see, and this is like a multicultural institution given by the tolerated by the Romanian government so that they could they could get education in their own culture and religion. And in this institution, we see the first diaspora consciousness emerging. This is poet Mehmet Niyazi. He got his education he got his education in Istanbul. He was a young Turk himself, but at the same time, he was writing some of his poetry in Crimean Tatar. And he was the main themes in his poetry. Later, if you are curious about it, we can look at some of his poetry. Is about Green Island and, his relations and his nostalgia or his, longing for his homeland. So we see for the first time this diaspora consciousness emerging, and also politically, we see for the first time Crimean Tatar Tamga is being used by political organizations of Crimean Tatars in this period. So the political organization called Dobruja Turkish Cultural Union, but it's actually a Tatar organization. So during communist Romania was kind of mirroring the Soviet policies. First, Romania decided Korenizatsiya of Crimean Tatars, but the Crimean Tatar language was banned in Soviet Union, so they couldn't teach Crimean Tatar. So they brought Kazan Tatar books in Kazan Tatar dialect to be taught to Crimean Tatars for the purpose of Korenizatsiya, but it backfired because it's still different. Although it's a Tatar dialect, it's still a different language. But Crimean Tatars themselves, like utilizing communist institutions like teacher schools and like literature departments in the universities, they collected a lot of folklore and cultural heritage and oral literature And these efforts has enabled us to have very rich oral tradition collected from this, as I said, very compact region of Crimean Tatar culture. And today, the Crimean Tatar is continued through Muslim Union of Crimean Tatars, an institution, a diaspora institution, as well as Mufti in Romania is always elected from Tatars rather than Turkish community. So, okay. So, and I wrote a book about interwar Crimean Tatar diaspora movement in Romania, and here is some of the festivals, Tepresh, spring festivals they are holding. You know, this festival is, I think, about like 400 years old, because we even Khrushchevsky mentions it, right? That the Crimean Tatars were holding this festival. And here, you know, horse races always part of this festival. And here the Crimean Tatars waiting for in the Constanta harbor to immigrate to Turkey. You know, the immigration to Turkey was also inspired by Turkish ambassadors in Romania. And they said, you know, we are starting this new country, Turkish Republic, and we need Turkish people, you know, or close enough Turkish people to, you know, we have very little population. So they kind of convinced a lot of Crimean Tatars to immigrate to Turkey once again during just before the Second World War. And I told you part of my family history, other part of my family history. This is my grandmother. She came to Turkey when she was 18 years old in 1940. So just during the war. Okay. So another significance of you know, Romania for Crimean Tatar diaspora was, you know, Turkey did not tolerate any Crimean Tatar diaspora nationalism, because Turkey had a pact, Turkish-Soviet friendship pact, right? Non-aggression pact. So all Crimean Tatar activities were banned in Turkey. Plus, Turkey wanted to create a new Turkish nation and didn't want any kind of ethnic separation or distinctiveness, right? Because of that reason, you know, you would know perhaps Cafer Seyid Ahmet here, you know, the defense minister of Crimean Tatar Republic, 1917. Here he is in the Constanta railway station, because every year he visited the Crimean Tatar diaspora in Romania. And this is like one of the first lawyers of this community, who was educated in Bucharest Law University, Law Department, Selim Abdulhakim, right? And also Müstecip Ülküsal, the leader of diaspora. So these individuals have never seen these two Crimea, right? They are diaspora-born individuals, but they started Crimean Tatar national movement, of course, inspired by Cafer Seyid Ahmet. And they formed some kind of a national center, which became a part of, you know, League of Promethean League. You know, during the interwar period, everybody was expecting Soviet Union will fall very soon. This experiment cannot continue. So all nationalist people came together in Europe to form a Promethean League to fight with the Soviet Union, to work for its collapse, right? And this was sponsored by Marshal Pilsudski of Poland, and Ukrainian nationalists were, of course, part of this. So they all worked together. And Crimean Tatars each had a journal, and Crimean Tatars had the journal Emel, who was, you know, publishing a lot of anti-Soviet articles. For example, recently I looked at it, and I see the Holodomor and famine in Crimea featured in this journal. And I say this is a transnational movement because they also connected with Tatars in Poland who were there for 400 years, as you know. During the establishment of Crimean Khanate, some members of Horde go there to work for the Polish-Lithuanian kingdom, and they married there and stayed there, but they're still Muslims. And also a lot of Karaims live in Poland, who speak Crimean Tatar language, as you know, but who are Jewish by religion. And this national center also served important role to defend the rights of Crimean Tatars during Nazi occupation of Crimea, right? They became advocates. They went to Berlin and talked to whoever they could find, whoever would listen to them. And after the World War II, they also worked in Radio Free Europe and Center for Learning Soviet Union. But after, about the late 1950s, everybody thought that there was no more hope for the collapse of the Soviet Union. So neither US nor any other powers were willing to support this kind of activity. So there was kind of a silent period in Crimean Tatar exile nationalism after that. But let me show you some pictures. This is Mehmet Niyazi's tomb. This Tarak Tamga is the first, kind of political use of Tarak Tamga for Crimean Tatar nationalism, because, this is Tarak Tamga, as you know, is a symbol of Gerai family, but this is kind of an invented tradition here. I'm sure you know about Hobsbawm, right? So this became the symbol of Crimean Tatar national identity from then on. And according to my research, there was like 4,000 Crimean Tatars just for this, ceremony. Again, this is 1934 in Romania. They are doing, a theater play for Crimea's liberation. And again, they are doing a tour to Poland, right? Crimean Tatar musical ensemble and the theater ensemble, and they're visiting Süreyya Şapşal, which is the leader of Karaims in Poland. And again, this is Lipka Tatars and Romanian Tatars together. Okay. And then we come to Turkey, the largest diaspora, because there's continuous immigration. So some of my cousins have directly their ancestors came from Crimea to Anatolia. But my ancestors, as I said, came to Crimea, to Dobruja, and then Turkey. So there are like kind of these two different groups in Turkey. In Turkey, they started the Tatar Charitable Society at the same time, where there was some movement in Romania, right? And they even collected aid for Crimean famine in 1922 and Volga famine. But as I said, Turkey didn't permit different organizations, NGOs. There was this kind of more authoritarian period. And that's why the first Crimean Tatar associations, solidarity associations, emerging in 1950s by Crimean Tatar refugees from Crimea who came to Turkey after the war. And they came to Turkey, they were immigrants, and they saw the need. They said, we need an organization, we are trying to settle in Turkey. However, they didn't stay in Turkey much. Some of them stayed, but most of them went to the United States because United States, offered them American citizenship. So in Turkey, we see the steppe language of, Crimean Tatar. Probably some of you are Crimean Tatars. Crimean Tatars have a problem. Like they don't have a common language, right? I mean, in the sense that they have three dialects. They speak three dialects at the same time. And we see the steppe dialect became the dominant dialect in Turkey because the Crimean Tatars who maintain their identity in Turkey, they come from Dobruja. I told you about how Dobruja was a kind of a diasporic space that Crimean Tatars were able to maintain their identities. And also, according to the research, the Crimean Tatars who immigrated first and in larger numbers are those who encountered with Russians for the first time. So Nogais in southern Ukraine and also Crimean Tatars who speak kind of a Nogai language, steppe language from Taman region, Kerch region, and from northern Crimea, right? I think they were larger in population, so they kind of dominated other dialects such as, Yalıboya dialect or, Tat dialects. So according to research of Hakan Kırımlı, they have founded at least 500 villages, probably there are more, 2 towns, and many, many neighborhoods in cities. And they integrated into ethnic Turkish culture because, it's very proximate. But we also see a separate Nogai culture surviving in Turkey. So some of the Nogais have come through Romania, Bulgaria, and Turkey, but some has come directly from Caucasus to Turkey. So they have kind of acquired some kind of a Circassian culture as well. That's why they're a little bit distinct, but still their language is very close and understandable to Crimean Tatar. So Crimean Tatars in Bulgaria, Dobruja was one region belonged to Romania up until Second World War. In the Second World War, Dobruja was divided into two, and some part was given, southern parts were given to Bulgaria. And that is why we have Crimean Tatars in Bulgaria as well today. But as I said, because of the larger Turkish population, we see a segmented integration and high level of intermarrying between Tatars and Turkish people. But, we have a researcher who is researching Shuman in Bulgaria, who still have Crimean Tatar villages and Crimean Tatar culture. But also in other regions such as Rus, Dobrich, I forgot what is in Bulgarian, Varna, right? These regions also host a lot of, especially Pazarcık, was a very important cultural center of Crimean Tatar nationalism. And the ML journal I just mentioned, the Promethean journal of Crimean Tatars, started there in 1930. Okay, so here is another theater play about Bora Girayhan, right? Are here staged in Pazarcık, right? Another folklore, tours to Pazarcık. And finally, the Crimean Tatars in the US. This is kind of a newest diaspora because they are originally refugees of World War II, and they were, placed to US as a third safe country. After living a few years in Europe in refugee camps. And one of the significant refugee is the author, Cengiz Dağcı. And just like Mehmet Niyazi, he is also talking about diasporic consciousness, right? He's a person who also theorized diasporic consciousness and longing for the homeland in literature. So Crimean Tatars, interestingly, became the first Muslim community of Brooklyn. Today, their association is located in Brooklyn, and also their community lives in neighborhoods close to each other in Brooklyn. And Fikret Yurtar is an important figure. He is the founder of Crimean Foundation, and he also received reparations from Austria. He went to the legal procedures to obtain that, because most of these Crimean Tatar refugees either worked in national committees in Crimea during World War II, or they were kidnapped as kind of Ostarbeiter when they were teenagers. They were taken to Germany or Arbeitsfront, right? For these reasons, they deserve reparations from Austria. Okay, so and other exile and other in my book, I have a book on Crimean Tatar diaspora. I try to conceptualize Crimean Tatars who were deported from Crimea on 18 May 1944, not as diaspora communities, but exile communities, because diaspora implies somewhat integration, a little bit of voluntariness, right, in host societies. But these communities were exiled, were deported, right, against their wills to these regions. And the communities in Ukraine, right, they have tried to return to Crimea in 1960s and 70s, but the authorities didn't permit them to settle, so they settled places close to Crimea, such as southern Ukraine or North Caucasus. So today my topic are not about these exile communities, right? I'm mostly talking about diaspora communities, but we have to also underline that there is a new diaspora community in Canada, in Poland, right? And also we can say the Crimean Tatars in mainland Ukraine became internal diasporas because they are, for example, Mejlis is in exile right now. A lot of NGOs, a lot of communities in southern Ukraine that had to leave Crimea after 2014. For example, Islamic communities with Tahrir communities right now living in Lviv, right? So in a way, they are also diaspora because they're living far from their homelands. The reason which made me start to work on diaspora was when I was growing up as a teenager, right? I witnessed this rejuvenation with my own eyes of diaspora in my small community in Ankara, right? And the post-1990 rejuvenation of Crimean Tatar diaspora, I told you after 1950s, Crimean Tatar political movement somewhat subsided, became very latent, very silent, right? But after the return of co-ethnics to Crimea, there is, a lot of activation and mushrooming of many diasporic organizations, which finally culminated in Diaspora World Crimean Tatar Congress, which started in 2009. But the more important one was the one convened in 2015. Here, Crimean Tatars invite Ukrainian foreign minister and also invite Turkish foreign minister, right? Fulfilling their role as kind of bridge between Ukraine and Turkey. So, as I said in the beginning, after 2014, we see a lot of movements. This is in Canada, this is in Istanbul, right? Against occupation of Crimea, occupation of Ukraine, right? Here we see Nogay organization also against, Kremlin, right? Now we can pass to the second part of my lecture, which will be the relationship between Crimean Tatar diaspora and Ukraine. And Crimean Tatar diaspora, as I said, supported return of Crimean Tatars from Central Asia to Crimea. And I tried to calculate how much money really flew from Turkey to Crimea, but it's really impossible to calculate. So much philanthropy, even my own family, right? We have contributed. We, like my parents has carried drugs like from the pharmacy, like in big sachets every time they went to the Crimea by plane. So Crimean Tatar diaspora organizations in majority since 1990 pro-Ukrainian, despite having some complaints about Ukraine, problems about Ukraine, right, before 2014. But they have always been, structurally pro-Ukrainian, because the other option is becoming pro-Russian, and that's kind of unthinkable according to Crimean Tatar collective memory, right? So Ukraine has an advantage there. Whatever Ukraine does, it looks like Crimean Tatars will never be pro-Russian. But at the same time, Russia is working hard among the Crimean Tatar diaspora to create some kind of pro-Russian factions, just like it's trying to create in Crimea, right? They're trying to utilize Eurasianist ideology, right, or money or other things. So Crimean Tatar diaspora engages a lot of diplomacy, lobbying for Turkey-Ukraine relations. We have Turkish-Ukrainian Business Association, mainly founded by Crimean Tatars, redirecting this is the main thing for Crimean Tatar diaspora. Maybe they're not collecting a lot of money, right? But they are directing Turkish government aid to Crimea and Ukraine. Turkey has a lot of agencies such as TİKA, Turkish Development Agency, YTB, right, many others, Turkish Diaspora Ministry. So they are lobbying to these organizations, for political rights and for economic situations of Crimean Tatars. As I said, there are a lot of protests, and they always support Ukrainian embassies here, collaborate with Ukrainian diaspora organizations. And the ones in the US, they support indigenous representation at the UN. We have in America Ayla Bakkallı, who is a professional advocate who does advocacy for indigenous people in the UN. That's her job, and she's now working for Crimean Tatar Meclis. One issue is supporting, advocating for Turkey's joining to embargoes against Russia and Crimea, and also always trying to, keep Turkish-Russian rapprochement in check and fight against continuous Russian disinformation in Turkey. We have this WhatsApp group that we identify any kind of disinformation, and we have to write a lot of petitions to the journals, newspapers, all this. Okay. So Ukraine's engagement with Crimean Tatar diaspora has also developed recently. For example, I was invited to Antalya to receive a medal from Ukraine for my services. So I think this is like a really positive thing to encourage diaspora activists. Also, appointment of Neriman Celal, as I mentioned. And a lot of scholars, including myself, I couldn't go, but we were invited to the Crimean platform. And all attempts to research Crimean Tatar history, just like you do at Kiev Mohila University, and develop Crimean Tatar culture in Ukraine, indirectly acts as a benefit for the Crimean Tatar diaspora, because we might not have the resources to teach, for example, Crimean Tatar language, or we don't have course books. So this kind of, because in Turkey, ethnic groups are not sponsored by the state, right? Turkish state is neutral towards all ethnic groups, but Ukraine has kind of a more kind of multiculturalist policies in that respect. And also recently there's an attempt for instilling diaspora citizenship for Crimean Tatars who can prove that their ancestors come from Crimea. And also we see higher coordination of Ukrainian and Crimean Tatar diasporas. Especially, for example, Canadian diaspora of Ukrainians very active to reach out to Crimean Tatars. They established a program of indigenous PhD program for Crimean Tatar scholars. And we see a lot of scholars such as Magushi, Ostapchuk, Sirida. They work on Crimean Tatar-Ukrainian relations. They translate their books into Turkish to appeal Turkish diaspora. So when we come to policy recommendations for Ukraine, so how can Ukraine tap, embrace, and govern Crimean Tatar diaspora, right? So I have a formulation. I say Ukraine is a step motherland of Crimean Tatars, right? So it's like our adopted home state. Of course, our homeland is Crimea, but right now Crimea is part of Ukraine, and of course we endorse it. This is very good, and that's why Ukraine becomes kind of our stepmotherland, so, right? We have to have this kind of relationship. For example, Crimean platform, these are my recommendations, that it must be developed to include diaspora organizations. I think there was talk recently about possibility, like Crimean Tatar associations, for example, in Turkey should be part of this platform to make policies about Crimea. So we have to develop a common policy for Crimean Tatars in Crimea right now, who engage in cultural and scientific projects to maintain their culture and suffer human rights abuses. There is no clarity about what to do about these Crimean Tatars. Ukraine must support democratization in Turkey against authoritarian pull of Russia. You know, Russia has this transnational authoritarian project, wants to make all states, you know, having this authoritarian club. And support moderate Islam. I think there are some institutions that work with Mejlis, right? And coordination with Crimean Tatar ethno-political authority, that is Mejlis, to govern diasporas. There is a coordination, but I think it has to be more systematic and institutionalized, maybe. Inclusion of Crimean Tatar identity, such as we see some attempts for rejuvenation of language. For example, there is toponymies issue not resolved. And recently I was working on how to include Crimean Tatar famine of 1932-33 to the Holodomor narrative. And Martin was also, you know, guiding me in that respect. And also Crimean Tatars must enter a lot of historical museums. Stalin's crimes must be researched against the Crimean Tatars, right? These all attempts will indirectly affect Crimean Tatar diaspora's relations to Ukraine. So Ukraine kind of can tap more from the diaspora. And Crimean Tatar autonomy is also a common project it must be a common project of Crimean Tatar diaspora and Ukraine. I know that Crimean Tatar diaspora wants to have a say about what kind of autonomy will there be in Crimea after the occupation. So recently there was this discussion that I was engaged today. You know, I think Russia is engaging in this hybrid policy of easy Turkish citizenship for Crimean Tatar migrants in Turkey. You know, there was this campaign that suddenly grew in Telegram. But I think Ukraine should oppose this, and Ukraine should develop a return program for post-2014 Crimean Tatar refugees. I mean, they shouldn't stay in Turkey, and there shouldn't be some kind of an easy track citizenship for Crimean Tatars, right? It would highly depopulate the population in Crimea. And this is not good for Ukraine's foreign policy or Crimean Tatar benefits. This I have said before. Okay. Oh, I said all of them before. Okay. So, in conclusion, Ukraine must reach out to Crimean Tatar diaspora as its stepchild, maybe, right? Crimean Tatar diaspora is the bridge between Turkey and Ukraine and can channel Turkey's many resources to Ukraine, supporting Ukraine's sovereignty. And Ukraine must embrace Crimean Tatar diaspora under this civic citizenship framework, because we know that Ukraine has this new narrative that all ethnic groups are, welcome in this new Ukrainian nation building. And relations with Crimean Tatar diaspora must be institutionalized. There has to be some kind of institution, I don't know, maybe World Crimean Tatar Congress might have some kind of links, institutional links with Ukraine. It could be that. And Ukraine's cultural outreach will strengthen Crimean Tatar diaspora's distinct identity. So, in a way, it's like asking Ukraine to support Crimean Tatar culture in Turkey, for example, right? Ukraine maybe not has enough resources under the war conditions, but I'm talking about the long-term project of survival of Crimean Tatar culture in the diaspora is for Ukraine's benefit. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So in conclusion, I want to say that Ukraine needs a strong Crimean Tatar diaspora if Ukraine wants to keep Crimea, right? Because strong and existing Crimean Tatar culture is the best, way of Ukraine's territorial integrity. But I'm not just saying this from a rational and pragmatic point of view. As I said, Ukraine and Crimean Tatars have a lot of cultural affinity since, 16th century. Of course, there are some important issues there also that must be addressed. But this anti-Russian kind of anti-colonial political outlook, I think, must be utilized, right, to create greater solidarity, collaboration for the strengthening of both Ukrainian sovereignty and Crimean Tatars, some kind of political existence. So it's 54 minutes. So thank you for listening. Thank you for your patience. And I am looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Aydın. Thank you a lot. I believe there are many questions that can be asked on this issue, on this topic. Probably I will start with a very small question that I personally interested to me. I know some names, but I'm not following them precisely. Do you have any colleagues who are studying the vastest diaspora that is emerging right now after the 2014 occupation of Crimea? Is there any papers that can be you can recommend on this issue, on the diaspora?
Migrant communities, right? You're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I myself try to make a distinction because, some of the diaspora is maybe like 200 years old and some of them are 10 years old, right? So I think they have different dynamics. They can be diaspora or they can be part of diaspora in the future. But right now they have more like a migrant type of identity. What do I mean by that? They are trying to settle and integrate, right? They have issues like how to find a job and how to find a house. how to send kids to school, right? So they generally have their small WhatsApp groups and very small networks. They work through that. They, of course, as all migrants, have a lot of problems and they want more kind of support from the diaspora communities. And some of the communities, of course, not all of them are very wealthy, so they cannot always answer all of their needs. You know, migrants have so many needs, but they're doing as best they can. And sometimes, of course, there's a tension because also there is a different identities, right? Some are already very Turkified and hybrid, and some have maybe more kind of Ukrainian identity, the ones that came later. So there are some tensions, but in generally, the migrants prefer not to found their own clique or own association because they told me, I did research on that, and they told me they don't want to divide the Crimean Tatar diaspora, right? So they understand there must be solidarity. So that Turkey, in terms of Crimean Tatar migrants, you know, they have a great opportunity. Turkey just right away gave them 8 years of permanent residence, a long-term permanent residence. It can be extended. It can be, I think, forever, for life. But they still, some of them didn't want to stay in Turkey. There was a lot of transit migration. And the reason was, you know, Turkey was not paying a salary or anything, you know, doesn't provide housing or anything, just the status. But as you know, Germany, Ireland, they provide more opportunities for Ukrainian immigrants. After 2014, we have a significant migrant community, we can say, in Poland. Poland has been a place where Crimean Tatars also started a lot of businesses and quite well integrated, we can say. Germany, Ireland, also strong communities, even in France, right? Canada, Alina here is from Canada, also has a strong community. American community is also strong. New communities. So I haven't researched to Europe or Canada or United States, but there are some books. I think Elmira Muratova has done some interviews about their collective memory and their memory of deportation, how much they maintain it, right? And their collective traumas, of course, also due to 2014. And I think Victoria Sereda has written a chapter. And also some Turkish scholars based in Germany, they are also studying them under the umbrella of Muslim Ukrainian immigrants, right? And I also researched Ahuska Turks from Ukraine as well in Turkey. It's a larger community. So if you have questions, I can also compare it with Crimean Tatars. Yeah. But it's a new research topic, and definitely we need a lot of funding, of course. We have to travel to different European countries.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience? Don't be shy. I encourage you to.
One question.
Yeah, sure.
As a linguist, I'm interested what are revitalization measures in diaspora for the Crimean Tatar language, mainly, for example, in Romania and Turkey, because you were mentioning about rich cultural heritage materials and folklore materials in Romania, and also schools and email journal in Turkey. What do you know? How can diaspora revitalize the language?
That's a very good question. I think language is very important, and if the language is gone, it will be very hard to maintain Crimean Tatar culture, because Crimean Tatars are very urban people. I mean, they integrate very fast to Western societies. it's not like Ahıskas, Ahıska Turks, very rural and still maintain their traditions, and their Turkish is almost untainted, right? But for Crimean Tatars, they easily adapt to every society. They are very open, and sometimes this becomes a hurdle, right, for maintaining language. In terms of traditional language resources, we have a lot of books published in Romania, and if one goes to Romania, we can still collect a lot of folklore. I think some old people still possess a good knowledge of language, and also many old people in Turkey are still we can record them. We should record them. I mean, they have very good command of Crimean Tatar language, but it is also fastly dying, because if this old generation currently goes, I don't know how much new generation in Romania or in Turkey can speak the language. In Romania, there are sporadic Tatar language classes in the association, but they're not systematic and not institutionalized. So if there's a teacher, they start it, and if the teacher goes, they forget about it. In Turkey, there has been a long problem of course books for a long time. And Turkey is relying scholars from Crimea and Ukraine, right, to write the course books. I think they have finished some of them. I think Alina also worked to prepare some of these course books. And then Turkey wants to start Crimean Tatar classes in the associations. In theory, you can even have Crimean Tatar classes in schools, but nobody used this. One problem, as I said, is lack of standardization of Crimean Tatar language. So Crimean Tatars in Turkey, they prefer steppe dialect. This is the dialect they learned from their grandmothers. And now if you impose them Bahçesaray dialect, it feels like a foreign language to them, right? And also because it doesn't make sense, because Bahçesaray dialect is so close to Turkish. So it's like learning Turkish under the name of Crimean Tatar. So it wouldn't really make sense in Turkey. So I don't know what is the solution to them. But I have a very good friend who is a linguist of Crimean Tatar in Turkey, and she recently protested and told me there is no Crimean Tatar language because every grammatical rule, you have to do it according to this three dialect. And Crimean Tatar language books are a lot thicker than Kazakh language or Uzbek language. So I don't know what kind of a solution. Are there any nations which uses different languages at the same time? I don't know. These issues I'm not expert in. The community in the United States also was teaching Turkish in their association instead of Crimean Tatar. So, yeah, I mean, one problem is Crimean Tatars always tend to have the segmented integration into the Turkish communities because of the proximity of culture and also common history, I think, identity. So I think Ukraine can be only resource of having a separate Crimean Tatar space, because I know there aren't a big Turkish community in Ukraine to integrate into. So ironically, Ukraine can help Crimean Tatar diaspora rejuvenate its language.
Yes,
Hello.
Smith.
I
Yeah.
I have a question. Thank you for a very insightful presentation. I have quite many questions, but I will try to focus on some the most interesting for me. I was thinking how different political regimes in Ukraine, yeah, like throughout, like let's say Kravchuk, then Kuchma, Yanukovych, how they utilized Crimean Tatars diasporas, whether there were like some period of, like thawing, and rather more closer relationship than like, let's say, this like I don't know, something like this, yeah, like what kind of how those political regimes utilize this diaspora, whether it was a thing at all, because uh, maybe they didn't really pay
Right.
attention to it.
Yeah. You gave me a good idea to develop my paper. Maybe I should look at each period, right? This will deepen my analysis. But from the top of my head, I think Crimean Tatar diaspora, of course, takes their cue from Meclis, right? Another point I forgot to mention is Meclis' role in consolidating diaspora, right? So Ukraine definitely must tap this, instead of maybe going directly to diaspora, go there with Mustafa Cemilev and Rifat Chubarov, right? And then they can, help kind of, because they have a deep understanding of Crimean Tatar diaspora culture. Um, so they kind of mirrored Meclis relations with Ukrainian authorities generally, but it also the Turkish government, who is in Turkish government, also affected their relationship with Ukraine. So, for example, Süleyman Demirel, Turkish president, was very interested in Turkish world, right? And in that situation, he wanted to develop relations with Ukraine and Crimean Tatars. So they have been very active in late 1990s to early 2000s, and they tried to find kind of a way of working with different presidents, we could say. Kravchuk was, of course, period. In the Kravchuk period, Meclis was allying with Ruh Party, so it wasn't very advantageous for Crimean Tatars. But diaspora is never like, oh, maybe you shouldn't play on that horse, play on the other horse. They never really, of course, dispute the authority of Cemilev, and they try to follow through. But for Yanukovych, they told me in my interviews he's very bad, but he accepts bribes. so they still even because diaspora had a lot of things to do in Crimea. For example, they need access during religious festivals, Kurban Bayram. They want to do the sacrificial ceremony there. They wanted easy entrance to Crimea, not to be waited in the border, right? Or sometimes they were doing a lot of investment, buying houses, all of things, and they kind of found a way of working through even with Yanukovych, because his guys also were accepting bribes. Yushchenko was, of course, very hopeful for Crimean Tatar diaspora, Yushchenko period. But, Yushchenko had a strict ethno-nationalist Ukrainian view that didn't really have place for Crimean Tatars. I mean, he said Crimean Tatar autonomy demands are basically doesn't make sense for him, right? He didn't have any place. So actually, the Yushchenko period kind of divided Crimean Tatar diaspora. Now that I'm remembering, some of them said maybe our pro-Ukrainian position was wrong all along, right? Even the best Ukrainian president doesn't really have a space for Crimean Tatar political existence. So why are we working here, right? And there was this division and debate in diaspora, and some said, maybe Dugin's Eurasianist ideology, we should embrace that. Maybe we can do something with Russia despite the whole history. But of course, 2014 changed all of this, right? And today, nobody who is not a Russian agent does not support Russia in Crimean Tatar diaspora. Of course, there are Russian agents.
Thank you for the answer. If no one has a question, I have another question. And if you can open your slides, there was tombstone of Mehmet Niyazi. Yes.
Niyazi, yeah.
What was interesting about this tombstone is a representation of Crimea. Yeah, like in a little frame, there was contours of Crimea, but at the same time, there was a part of what is now Kherson region, And I was wondering, in diasporic vision, Crimea represented only these like contours that we know as Crimea, the peninsula itself, or it was rather, a little bit extended territory.
Okay, yeah. So let's go a little bit back to 2018. Ukraine wanted to have a national state, and Crimean Tatars also wanted to have a national state, and there was this, kind of. They were scared of Ukraine, right? I didn't mention that, but it was just an interesting period of history. So some of the Crimean Tatar, like immigrant nationalists, they envisioned some kind of conflict of interest Ukraine will happen in the future. They were scared and cautious about Ukraine, let's say. Also, because the Khanate territory, of course, occupied southern Ukraine, well into the central Ukraine. So, for example, some of the journals, we see a larger, greater Crimea, right? Kind of. Here you see, right? Maybe, it's a little bit north. So in some of the issues of ML, yes, there was southern Ukraine is also included in Crimea, Crimean homeland, or in the vision of homeland. But eventually in 1980s, it consolidated into just the peninsula. So it wasn't clear for the diaspora what the homeland was. And it is normal, right? Because we don't have a kind of a national history narrative. Everything is done by diaspora organizations or authors, because the Crimean Tatars did not have a state. So the national historiography or myth wasn't also consolidated. That's what I can say. But of course, after Ukraine's sovereign existence and emergence as a sovereign state, it is very clear, that Crimean Tatar demands only concern Crimea. Yes, Elzara Halimova, I think, wants to ask a question.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for the lecture. And first, I have one comment and another question. Here, one comment is in defense of the literature, Crimean Tatar language, because actually, I'm a linguist of Ukrainian language myself, like professionally, and that's why actually in Ukrainian language there are also a lot of different dialects, a lot of them, and that's why you come up to the idea of having like codification into the literature language. And the same was with the Crimean Tatar. When we say regarding Crimean Tatar language that it is the August Kipchak language group, like the one that has the traces of different Turkic language groups in it. That's why to understand each other, these different dialects, we right now use this for the idea to kind of like understand each other. This was actually from 1920s when they decided like took this idea into action, and that's why just for the sake of understanding each other in the Crimean Peninsula, and right now too. That's why most of the Crimean Tatar language books, they are teaching the kids and adults right now in Ukraine on using this Ortayu Lakshevisi as the like lingua franca for all Crimean Tatars. Just wanted to add about that. Or maybe because I myself use firstly Ortayu Lakshevisi because my roots come from mostly Bakhchisarai and this region, and that's why I would just say a funny thing that when I learned Turkish, and my teacher was Ukrainian, but like from this Turkish courses, she said that, I hear some accent that you speak some Turkic language, but it is not Turkish. And this is, like for me also the way of, how to say, kind of like sign that these are kind of a bit different groups. And that's why I believe that I still have the accent in Turkish language when I speak, just because of my own like native dialect. Because it is really, well, for me at least, it is different, and these are different languages, and that's why, for example, at my Crimean Tatar lessons that I take also in our group, sometimes I need to ask more questions regarding, for example, the steppe dialect, because I don't know those words, and like I need some more translation, in kind of translation for that. And that's why, that's why I'm the strong supporter that Crimean Tatar language and literature language exists, although we have, and this is our richness, that we have different dialects, and because it shows what a beautiful history and diverse history we have, how we then developed as one nation. And the question itself here is about different thing, because what concern I have right now in 2026 and the fourth year of the full-scale invasion is regarding the I don't know how you would call it in the right way, but this kind of the newest diaspora of the Crimean Tatars. I mean, the ones that had to leave occupied peninsula after 2022 and this mobilization laws in Russia, and the way how to not lose them from our perspective too. I mean, because there are, for example, a lot of those people right now live in Ireland, but are they called diaspora or not, for example? Who are they? How to still have them in our, how to say, I don't know, in our view of still being Ukrainian citizens, because most of them came to Ireland as Ukrainian citizens, but after 2022 and living under occupation for like 8 years, for example. And this is also, and this somehow constructs another world view of these people, and the ones that, for example, lived in Ukraine, in the mainland Ukraine, due to various reasons, before 2014 and after 2014. And that's why this means that we have very different experiences right now, and still how to develop this kind of like being on the same page issue. This was my concern that I wanted to share. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elzara, for this nice comment and question. Regarding the common Crimean Tatar dialect that is elected, I think in 1937, some Congress in Crimea. But the problem is we were not there, right? We were in diaspora talking our own thing. We didn't even know about what was happening in the Soviet Union. So we kept on talking our steppe dialect, and we kind of like it. That's the problem. And that's the dialect I learned from my grandmother. She wasn't fluent in Turkish, so she could always talk to me in Crimean Tatar. And the Crimean Tatar I interviewed told me, why am I in this movement if I'm not going to protect my grandmother's language? I mean, for us, it feels like we're adopting another language that is very close to Turkish, right? We are already very fluent in Turkish, right? So I don't know, like, really, what is the... and a lot of important Crimean Tatar literary talents, like Bekir Çobanzade, many others, Mehmet Nusret, they have masterpieces in Chol dialect, steppe dialect. And to tell the truth, that language has more flavor for me, to my ear. The other sounds like an artificial made-up language, like Bahçesaray dialect. I mean, we also have a lot of important Eşref Şemizade and other works, but I don't know, maybe it's because of my primordial kind of prejudices. I like Nogay Beyitleri, right? I love it so much more. You know, like our national anthem is in steppe dialect. So I think there might be a little bit difference with the Ukrainian dialects. I don't know, the dialects Ukrainians left out, is it a most flavorful one? I don't have enough language on the Ukrainian dialects and enough information. So
well, just a question of consent, you know, like the consent
maybe
of
question
different,
of case.
yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. That's just, I wanted to tell you the diaspora point of view, but I want you will think about what you're gonna do with this point of view. The other question, I don't know, it's $1 million question, how to return diaspora back to Ukraine. Migration research says not all of migrants return, right? Some of them will remain there. I think Ukraine will be a very transnational nation in the future. This might not be just always disadvantage, right? For example, myself, if I go back to Crimea, how much I can do, I will just get into prison. But remaining in Turkey, maybe I am serving Crimea more, right? I'm doing more kind of services. So you can, the idea of transnational nation is you can be a Crimean Tatar wherever you are, as long as, but of course there's a tipping point. I mean, not all of the diaspora should live, not all the part of the nation should be living in diaspora. And of course, somebody has to live in the homeland for sure. But your question reminded me something. So what happened in Turkey was there were immigrants, Crimean Tatar immigrants from Crimea and from Ukraine, right? Obviously, there has been some issues. There was some issues between them. Because, you know, Crimean Tatars in Crimea have this psychology of you abandoned us, you know, you don't know what we are going through every day, right? They have this kind of, you don't know, you criticize us, but you don't know what we are dealing with every day, right? They have other very serious concerns. And, you know, issue of collaboration. I mean, to what extent, what is collaboration, you know, like if you are sending your kid to Russian schools and I don't know, working in a Russian university, are you a collaborator? That's kind of, And what happened was in Turkey, they told me, they talked out their problems, and then they became one community again. So they came together and they started playing Crimean Tatar music, and dance classes were attended by all Crimean Tatars from Crimea and Ukraine. They come together as a group. So diaspora kind of facilitated these kind of coming together, because this is going to be our next challenge. There will be a rift, just like there is a rift between Crimean Tatar diaspora and Crimean Tatars from Soviet Union, right? We have two different cultures almost like. There will be in the future that if this occupation continues, there might be a social distance, cultural distance. That's the kind of issue. And, we have to find a way of, as diaspora and as Ukraine, develop policy towards how to decrease this social distance, right? That's always the issue with diasporas, Right now, we are all in diaspora, those including those in mainland Ukraine. So, yeah. Yes, Ismet.
Yeah, since we touched upon dialects, I had actually a question regarding how diasporas be how to say, unified in the process of in the places such as Romania, Turkey, because as Crimean Tatar, we all know that back in the days there was definitely division between Norais and Crimean Tatars from the coast, and even it was mirrored in the traditions, not what was very desired, this kind of interethnic marriages. So in a way, I was thinking how those Crimean Tatars, who came to places where they created diasporas, how they unified in a way, because still I guess it's a common belief that the exile 1944 actually unified the nation, completed the unification. Yes, when we all were in the same train, then in the places of exile. But before, our identities were rather regional or very place-based. Yeah. So I was thinking how this identity of Crimean Tatar developed in diasporas, especially, in the beginning of the last century.
Okay, yeah, I think first of all, as I said, this kind of steppe culture, kind of, if you like this primordial identity was very important, because steppe culture is a very oral culture. It's based on oral traditions, and it is strong and strong Kipchak culture, and it is hard to assimilate, and it is quite far from Anatolian Turkish culture. I think this helped them to maintain their distinctions, right? Also traditions very different. So, for example, Crimean Tatars, they were known for eating horse, right? Which Turkish people are so scared, right, of even this idea. I'm just joking, but kind of sufficiently different. So they were able to maintain, and also they have a very strong endogamy, right? They didn't really intermarry even with the Turkish people. Endogamy, not in the sense of marrying with relatives, but like Crimean Tatars. But after that, since with the urbanization and modernization, of course, this culture was threatened. And at that time, I think the Crimean Tatar political organizations played an important role in diaspora, because diaspora doesn't have a state. Like, we don't have a national television that we can teach Crimean Tatar language to kids, right? or national history books. We don't have anything like that. So we can't have standardization of culture. So these political organizations, they have, since 1920s, I observe, for example, my grandmother always prayed for Çelebi Cihan during prayer, right? Religious prayer. I was so shocked when I learned Crimean Tatar history in university. I had to come to the university to learn Crimean Tatar history. And I said, like, you are kind of an illiterate woman. How do you know about Çelebi Cihan, right? Because nobody teaches about Çelebi Cihan in Turkish history books either. And she didn't go to school anyways. But the Crimean Tatar associations, for example, they have these kind of events in every village, like Mevlüt for Çelebi Cihan, right? Like religious prayer every February. And they also use theater as a media of the time. So this place I showed you, they toured every village and major big village. And villages at that time were huge, right? Like thousands of people. And they kind of, also in the coffee houses, you know, most people were illiterate. So the Crimean Tatar journal would come, Emel, and somebody would read it to the whole audience. So that my grandmother, by 18, was a very knowledgeable about Crimean Tatar history and Çelebi Cihan, right? And she couldn't read, you know, in Latin alphabet, but she knew all of these things. I think what Müstecip Ülküsal done in Romania was unbelievable under those conditions, right? They even had a list of young men who would return to Crimea to serve in the would-be Crimean Tatar government, right? They were prepared because everybody was thinking Soviet Union would collapse anytime. We have to be prepared. We are going to do what we have done in 1917. We're going to establish Crimean Tatar Republic. So we will need cadres, prepared cadres in diaspora. So that was the whole purpose of diaspora activity, right? Prepare for the would-be independence of Crimea. And that's why they wanted to maintain this kind of a national culture. And this be turned into in my book, I explain it turned into a kind of a path dependence, right? A kind of a tradition, which was today still every, you know, February, of course, we do this anniversary of Çelebi Cihan's shahadet, right? And other important dates. Of course, deportation date also was entered our national narrative. So I think this national narrative was important. It was established in 1930s, and then it is now almost standard in all Crimean Tatar organizations.
Towns.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Could you talk a bit about the Crimean Tatar community in Uzbekistan? What do they have any kind of relationship with other diaspora communities? What relation do they have with Crimeans in Crimea, in Ukraine? Are they more part of the Russian world now? Any information like that?
Yeah, I think the return from Uzbekistan was continuing up until the annexation 2014. So people were, but it has slowed down, quite slowed down. And as you know, there was strong Islam Karimov regime in Uzbekistan for more than 10, 15 years, right? So Uzbekistan was a closed regime, and even you couldn't really easily go there for touristic or other purposes. But after Karimov, Uzbekistan is, because of economic reasons, is experiencing an opening to the outer world. And the first time Crimean Tatar diaspora in Turkey visited Uzbekistan 2 years ago. They had some kind of a cultural festival. Of course, Crimean Tatar culture is not really supported as a political identity in Uzbekistan, but under some kind of cultural format. So they are following the Russian template there, right? In Russia also, only cultural identities, sort of folkloric identities, are permitted. No political organization. But there was this cultural festival, and they also have Crimean Tatar music and dance ensemble there, and they are now going, I think, again this year. So slowly, Crimean Tatar diaspora in Turkey is also reaching out. Crimean Tatar exile community in Uzbekistan. And also Uzbekistan has been very vital in the annexation period, because a lot of Crimean Tatars, just after Putin announced this military conscription, right? So no flight to Western countries or Turkey is possible. So some of them went to Uzbekistan and stayed with their relatives, and some of them went to Kazakhstan. So I see this as a kind of collaboration of diaspora communities during difficult times. Some of them stayed in Romania, for example, the community in Romania. Some of them stayed in Caucasus, right, with their relatives. So right now, Crimean Tatars have this mobility capital. They have someone everywhere. So they have strong networks. Yeah, I think the Uzbekistan community will rejuvenate in the future. I mean, it's for sure they haven't lost their Crimean Tatar identity, but they cannot express it very freely.
I don't know if we have the time for one more. From a fellow Cholchivesa speaker, Salvos. And my question is around the Turkish diaspora, or rather its future. It is to this date is the biggest diaspora of Crimean Tatars, whether Nogalar or from other regions.
Right.
How do you see the future of the Crimean Tatar diaspora in Turkey today? And my question comes from a background, like in 1930s, there is a national Turkish movement. Doesn't matter if you're Turkic or not, you still have to learn Turkish everywhere, right? Even in Turkish language, there isn't a difference between Turkish and Turkic. There's just Turk to a degree. So with every generation, every diaspora becomes more and more assimilated, of course, right? Going back to the language question, which I had and Alina asked it. So how do you see the future of that Turkish diaspora being the biggest one? Do you see the language or just that history reference that you shared a lot, even in your own family's experience, being the anchor of that diaspora? Or is it going to be language eventually, if there are strong enough attempts to preserve it?
Yeah, I think language is key. As I said in the beginning, if we lose the language, I don't know how can we maintain the Crimean Tatar diaspora identity, because so many traditions, literature will also be lost. I mean, we will lose the connection. I mean, it is very hard to maintain identity in diaspora for the known reasons. Therefore, I think diaspora is like a canned food, right? But the source of the fresh food is coming from homeland. So, I mean, you can maintain, but you don't really reproduce culture very productively in the diaspora. Or maybe you reproduce it in a hybrid way. That could also be a way. I mean, Turkish people in Germany, they are not speaking Turkish anymore, but they do a lot of nice films, movies about Turkish culture. So the future would be a cultural diaspora in that sense, because of increasing intermarriage. It's hard to maintain the demography. But as I said, both Crimea and Ukraine is the source of identity, and diasporas know that. So that's why they invest in homeland and survival of the homeland, because without some kind of a political structure, I think diasporas will evaporate in the future. So, I mean, even within Ukraine, having some cultural rights, I think, would not be enough. There has to be some kind of a cultural autonomy for Crimean Tatars, even though it's non-territorial, right? That Crimean Tatars would have some schools, some media organizations, right? Funded by some state, right? It could be Ukraine. It is very important to have that kind of anchor. Otherwise, diaspora organizations will lose, I think. They're already very old in Turkey, like most people. And another challenge is the people mostly are on their phone right now, right? Social media. So maybe there can be some way of maintaining culture through social media, but young people are not coming to the associations. I mean, they're not going there and drink tea, right? So you have to find young people in where they are. The diaspora has to develop new methods. I mean, this is not just for Crimean Tatar diaspora, of course. I mean, my student was defending a thesis on Turkish diaspora in Australia. No young people is coming to the association building, right? Yeah, so diasporas has to reinvent themselves, but at the end of the day, the homeland must support diasporas.
Thank you. And kind of an adjacent question, the Turkish diaspora members, they were visiting Crimea already like post 2000. Do you track, or is it even a topic to monitor how many Crimean Tatars from the diaspora, Turkish ones specifically, were visiting Crimea before 2014, after 2014, after 2022, because it kind of escalates from that point on. Like, did we see if that was tracked, or if we can assume if there was a drop down or vice versa, an increase in visits from Turkish diaspora to Crimea?
Before 2014, there was a lot. Of course, there were direct flights from Istanbul in like 45 minutes. You can be in Simferopol. So, and even I think that you could go by ship too at some point. So I conceptualized them in my book as temporary returns, right? So a lot of people view this as kind of returning to your homeland, but of course, economically, you cannot just go then live there. There were a lot of intermarriages and a lot of business partnerships at that time, investments. A lot of people bought houses and some other places. So I didn't count, but almost all people who consider themselves Crimean Tatars, I think, visited Crimea, even if for touristic purposes. And after 2014, of course, some people are going from associations to Crimea mainly to provide some aid during sacrificial feast and Ramadan, right? They are providing some aid. But any Turkish people right now can easily travel to Russia, including Crimea, because there's this visa agreement. So if you are not like political like me, I would say it's easy to go to Crimea. But I think if I go there, it will be dangerous for me. And for Hakan Kırımlı and others, Russia already issued bans, travel bans. They cannot enter Russia. So I think most political people in the face of the associations cannot go there. Like they wouldn't be permitted to enter, at least to Crimea. Maybe they could go to Moscow, or they would also be very scared. But yes, Turkish people I hear go there, yeah. But of course, the visits have decreased a lot. This is one thing very, of course, we are very sorry about, and we, of course, we miss Crimea and people there. We have a lot of people we know. But we check Facebook to continue to follow up with the birthdays and other things. Yeah, social media is, I think, any ingredient that wasn't before before 2014 very much. I think Facebook, Telegram, and WhatsApp is heavily used. But of course, Russia is from time to time shutting social media. And there's also people continuously visiting from Crimea to Turkey. Also students, there are students who come, so we can follow news through this. Yeah, but of course it's very hard. I don't know which one was harder, Soviet times or today. Yeah. In Soviet times was, of course, there was a period where the Crimean Tatars had no information about Crimean Tatars there. Or that they weren't there anymore, right? They learned it 5 years later about the deportation.
Thank you, Dr. Aydın.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Mr. Aydın, for a very, very rich lecture and the discussion, the many issues that you pinpointed, and we can talk about them later probably, because there are many questions that you have raised during your presentation.
Yeah, I would like to share my books if you have like an email list, or I can send it to you and you can send it to this book
we have a
and also my book about Crimean Tatar diaspora. I would like to share, and you can find more information on all these issues there.
Great, thank you. Just send it to me and I will forward it to those who have been registered for this lecture. Thank you.
And the original article for this talk. What does Crimean Tatars mean for Ukraine?
Okay, it's time to finish, and thank you a lot, and thanks for everyone who have joined us today.
Thank you for all the questions and invitation.
Yeah, it was a nice discussion. Thank you. Follow us for more.
Yes. Hopefully. It was nice to talk to all of you, and akşam hayır olsun.
Akşam var.